Okay, so before we get into the start of part three, I'm just going to give you something useful you could start with right away, just to carry more authority and more presence. And that is just to deepen your voice by 10% and project your voice by 10%. You can't not imagine how powerful it is in terms of how people see you just instantly. Taking your friends, your family, your relatives, your colleagues, your coworkers, your bosses, your investors, your business partners, anyone. If you deepen your voice by 10%, and if you project your voice by 10% more than you usually already do, like the way I used to teach this was, 10% more than the environment you're already in. I would go so far as to say you should do 10% more than what you are used to doing. Because something happens. People, their ears perk up just a little bit more and they start paying attention. And they start paying attention. That really gets down to the essence of what refined leadership is making those little tweaks and making those continuous improvement methods down to the moment. People think about continuous improvement from a longer term scale. I want you to start thinking about it from a moment-to-moment basis. So picking up for where we were last time, we ended up with talking about the utility of having strong boundaries and how strong boundaries, almost in a weird way, is very much related to having high value. One could say that the strong boundaries came first and then all the value found its way inside. Some people might say because something was high value, to prevent it from, going into chaos and becoming low value, that strong boundaries developed around it. Whichever way you tend to go look at it, they developed and they evolved together. So if you expect to start increasing the value of what's on the inside, whether that's your health or what's in your mind or what your identity is made up of, strengthen your boundaries, make them tougher, make it sure that very, very little of low value gets in and a lot of high value gets in and very little of high value gets out at the same time. So before I continue on with more characteristics of the refined leader, I realized that there's so much in terms of this content to actually put inside of a video. I would actually be here for another 3 or 4 hours. So what I did is I put everything inside of a PDF called the Refined Leadership Blueprint. If you want to have a copy of this blueprint, I'll give it to you for free. All you have to do is click that link down in the description and I'll send you a copy myself. Okay, so click on that link down in the description. And I don't know if I'm going to put an email there or if I'm going to put a link. Anyway, just go to the description, go check it out. I'll put it there and you can go peruse it as quickly or as slowly as you like and start slowly, incrementally incorporating these items into your personality. So without further ado, let's continue here. Strong boundaries, okay? So that goes without saying, having strong boundaries. The next item here really is kind of interesting. It's really hard to do, harder to do than a lot of people think, and that is being the architect of your thoughts, beliefs, and attitudes. That's what the refined leader is, and what they do is that they're an architect of their thoughts, beliefs, and attitudes. The reason why I pick these like that is because that is what your identity is made up of. Your identity is really a story that you kind of make up and you tell to yourself. It remains persistent over time. And what is your identity other than a stack of your likes and dislikes, your desires and the things that you like to get away from? Really, I like to look at it like this, where you have at any point in time a single thought. A thought is just a moment in time. It's really, in my mind, a brick of what your identity is made up of. We could talk about identity being a good thing, being something which is stabilized, which is something that you want to stick to. The refined leader is not stuck in a particular identity. They can go and refine it. They can make it better. They can make it a different version than what they currently have already. To do that, they have to know what an identity is made up of. And I believe that identity is made up of thoughts. Thoughts stacked up on top of each other like bricks in a building become beliefs. Beliefs, when they're stacked up, a belief really is just a thought that persists throughout time. Something that, no matter the circumstances, something that you believe in, which is made up of logic, which is made up of the thoughts that you put in there. Something I always learned from my oldest brother who, taught me, introduced me to the whole world of like the culinary arts, is that to make good food, you need good ingredients. And to make a good identity, you need to have good thoughts. And you want to be very, very careful about how you put those together. Thoughts make beliefs. Beliefs, when you stack a bunch of beliefs together, they turn into attitudes. And your attitudes that persist throughout time really is what is the makeup of your identity. So if you want to understand how to go shape your identity, you have to be a true architect of the identity by changing and shifting around the different thoughts, the different beliefs, and the different attitudes that you go and present to the world with. Down to the point, going back to strong boundaries, down to the point where you're being very, very careful about the thoughts you even entertain in the first place. Logic is a very, very compelling argument to think in a very logical way. If A, then B, or if A and B, then C. Really be careful about how you want to go construct your identity. There's thoughts that may be logically true that you don't need to entertain. It may be the case that you didn't meet up to a certain standard at one point in your life. Does that mean you will never meet that standard in the rest of your life? It does not. It does not at all. It means there was a time in your life where you didn't meet a standard, and you could definitely change that in the future. Also, that goes to say, if you did consistently meet a standard back then in your life, while there's good confidence you will continue it onwards, there's no guarantee it's going to remain that case. You could just let up, and then you could lose everything that made you what you were in the first place, okay? There's a strong fluidity to someone's identity that it's really up to the user, how much they want to change it, how much they want to mold around with it, and really that comes up to, are you satisfied with the person that you are and the results you're able to generate in your business, with your teams, in your day-to-day life. To be the refined leader, you need to be in the moment of continuous improvement on a moment-to-moment basis so that people can see that you are dead serious about being, the best version that you can be. And when people see that, they feel that. They feel that around them. And it's extremely infectious to a point where, guess what? Members of your team also want to be at the height of their game as well. To be an architect of your own beliefs is really difficult to do, because when we think about architecture and buildings, we think that if we want to take a building down, we got to blow it up and we have to throw out the bricks and we have to put something else there instead. Your brain doesn't know that terminology. It doesn't understand, destroy something or take it down or break it apart. What it understands are, what do you feed, what do you starve, and where do you redirect attention. So those are the tools that you have. If you want to go change a set of thoughts that you have to look at what triggers those thoughts in the first place and then replace it with a slightly different thought. I have this painting above me, which I'm not sure if I'll be able to show you right now, but it's a painting of M.C. Escher's drawing hands. It's the two hands that are drawing each other, and it's by far been my favorite painting, my favorite drawing ever, because it, to me, represents what consciousness is. When you say, I am this, it's a very, very strange phenomenon, because who is the I that is saying? Is it the I that is declaring, or is it the I that is creating? You don't know which hand is creating the other, but they're generated nonetheless. And very much the same way that strong boundaries create value and value creates strong boundaries, the person that you are is very much created in one sense by how you declare yourself to be and what you declare yourself to be in the future. How things are right now and then how things are going to be in the future. So the thing that you can actually start applying is take an actual thought that you have, a trigger for a thought. You could take something along the lines of something you may not be good enough at yet, okay? And that yet is actually the shift right there. You may say, oh, I'm not very good at sales. I was like, well, you're not very good at sales yet. It's like, I'm not very good at sales because I haven't put in this many hours or this many calls or found the right guidance or mentorship for me to be able to learn these things. If every time you have the trigger thought of I'm not good at sales, and then you follow it up with, but that's because I'm not there yet, or but because I'm still working on it, or but I haven't done the right thing in order to get those results yet, what it does, it plants a separate thought in your head, which doesn't take you into downward spiral of I'm not good enough, therefore I'm not good, therefore I'm not good enough, therefore I'm not good, but rather I'm not good enough, but I could be better, but now I see evidence that I'm better, now I'm seeing that I'm actually good at this, now one day you could just declare yourself to be good at whatever that is, create that positive feed forward loop. There's a little bit of an art behind this. I want to take a little bit of extra time to do this, so I describe it a little bit more inside of my manual, my refined leadership blueprint. That's, again, over in the description, so you can go check that out to go read through it. The next item about being a refined leader is that they strengthen their body. They strengthen their body and they strengthen their mind, because the seat of their body, the seat of their mind and the seat of their brain is inside of their body. There's this new field of embodied cognition, which has come into the forefront of neuroscience, which has always kind of been there. Walt Whitman, the poet, I Sing the Body Electric, always talked about the influence of the mind on the body back at a time where the Cartesians believed that the mind was ultimately separate from the body, and the body was just this thing that had to come along for the ride, and the mind was ultimately this holier than thou type of thing, and the body was this thing that they had to be ashamed of and sort of try to discipline in a certain way. The mind is very much part of the body as much as the body is a part of the mind. The one thing that will separate us from the machines when artificial intelligence gets picked up, and we can't tell the difference between what's human and what's artificial, the one thing that we will have that will distinguish us from artificial intelligence is embodied cognition. Because the one thing that humans will always have are a body, emotions, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, calcium, things of that nature. Whereas a machine has silicon, a machine has carbon, a machine has other things that make it operate in a different manner. A machine can never know the experience of what it means and what it feels like to be hot or cold or sad. And a machine can't understand what that's like, no different than you can never understand what a machine feels like, if it even has feelings, when it runs out of battery, or when its system overheats, or when it's being overutilized, or if it's asked to do too many things, or it runs into a runtime error or a typeform error, something along those lines. Like, there's no way of actually knowing it until they're in that actual experience. A machine can never know that, and a human will always be able to know that. That'll be a big distinguishing factor. And a refined leader needs to really embrace this embodiedness of their cognition. They do so by working out their body, stretching their body. If I've never stretched a part of my muscle before, and I begin to do that, I'm actually working on my brain, because I'm reactivating the neurons and the sensors that are responsible for feeling those things. What this allows me to do is get a better sense and get in better touch with how I feel as an individual, and I can identify my feelings. You can't imagine how hard it is to be a leader and not to be able to identify certain emotions in certain people, or to identify different states of energy or focus if they're not in touch with how they experience those types of emotions. This level of empathy gives you the opportunity to help your employees, to help your teammates, your contractors, ride that line better of being in that flow state where the challenge is just a little bit harder than their skill sets. If you push too hard, then they break down. If you don't push enough, then they get bored and they start, fucking off and doing something else, or start ignoring you. You don't want to have that, but to be able to understand where they're at, you want to be able to feel it out just the same way that they are. And a refined leader knows to make their physical strength and their mental strength a priority. Mental strength being what? Their ability to focus for long hours on something. They selectively take breaks in a way such that they could do miniature sprints and then take miniature breaks in the meantime. I'll give you actually a methodology which is written inside of this blueprint a little bit later on to actually show you how you can work continuously throughout the day without having to take large breaks, or feeling like you have to take a nap, or feeling like you're burned out, or feeling like you can't focus anymore. I have a methodology. It's actually brilliant. It works really, really in a very clever way that a lot of my old clients, they actually really appreciate. The refined leader strives for alignment by living impeccably. Living impeccably. I talked about this in my 40-day fast manifesto. Okay? Living impeccably is what? Is someone who can live impeccably. They can go and refine their internal chemistry and biology by changing the things that they allow to stimulate them. Okay? If you don't know this, you could go back to that video, but to change what you allow to stimulate you is like changing the chemical equation that is you versus the world. If you change all these things that are pushing and pulling you in different directions, you could stabilize emotional states. You could stabilize energetic and focus states just by changing your environment. A lot of people would try to focus harder and harder, but I would say, look, maybe you just got to change your room. Maybe you have to change what direction of the room you're facing. You have to change how many times in the day are you standing up. What type of work are you focusing on early on? What type of work are you focusing on in the middle of the day? What type of work are you focused on later on in the day? How are you investing in your relationships? Perhaps it means that you just have to relocate to a different place where you're able to invest differently in those relationships, or just change where the work shows up. A lot of this, goes back to a previous video I made, the who, the where, and the when. Being really tuned into not necessarily just putting the work in, but rather putting yourself in the right positions first. You can put yourself in the right positions. What you're doing is you're changing your external influences. You make the work that you put forward a whole lot easier, and you make it a whole lot easier for you just to sit down and just plow away, and everyone else gets to go struggle and wonder how you did it. It's because you were able to apply leverage and put yourself in the right places. So that's rule one, is you could refine your internal biology and chemistry by changing what you allow to influence you. Living impeccably, rule two, is you could rewrite your entire identity. You could refine your entire identity by changing the stories that you tell yourself, changing the thoughts to build up different beliefs build up different attitudes build up different identities entirely. You could change who you are as a person, which is wild to think about, because everyone these days is just focused on what am I, who am I supposed to be, which category do I go fall in. It's all groupthink. Okay? You are whoever you decide to go be. Your identity can be whatever you want, whatever you shape it into be. And to go and do that, you have to change specific thoughts into specific beliefs, into specific attitudes, into specific identities. So you could really refine and rewrite your entire identity simply by changing the stories that you go and tell yourself. And the last item is you could refine your whole life entirely by choosing to live impeccably, to behave impeccably. And that goes back to an earlier topic that I was mentioning about being able to go and improve yourself on a moment-to-moment basis. Everyone wants to think about the person they want to be 40 years or 20 years from now. If you want to think, if I was actually going to be that person 20 years from now, what's the type of work I must be doing on a moment-to-moment basis now? And as long as you can remember more times in the day where you are and what you are doing to meet that 20-year person, the more likely it's going to go happen. Where you lose at this is if you forget and you just allow yourself to be pushed around by your environment, okay? That's your external influences, changing your internal chemistry, changing how you instinctively react to certain things, okay? Get back to the present moment and ask yourself, start working on the present moment and say, hey, what do I need to do in this moment to live more impeccably, to be like the person I need to be in 20 years from now? It's like, well, what does that mean? What is your voice doing? What is your body doing? What are you thinking about? What are you working on? How do you selectively go after things? What sort of relationships are you developing with other people? What is your level of communication that you're actually displaying? You know the answers to these questions. You simply have to ask yourself. And if you don't know the answers to these questions, you need to ask someone who does have those answers. And you need to go to that person for those answers when you need it. It's that culture of continuous improvement. And I really mean continuous improvement, not at a hour-to-hour basis, but literally a moment-to-moment basis. And you can go completely change your entire life just as long as you could be in that state of continuously improving upon the present moment as long as you can throughout the whole day, for as many days as you possibly can over the course of a year, for as many years as you can over the course of several decades. If you could do that, if you could remember to do that, there's some pretty, amazing things that someone can go do over that time horizon. A lot of people say people tend to overestimate what they could do in a year, but underestimate what they could do in 5 years. And that definitely is the case here. You can really become world-class at any craft that you want with 5 years of focused effort like this. I mentioned 20 before, and that's really to become the best of all time. But really to be world-class at something, it only takes about 5 years of that level of focused effort. So you could refine your entire life by living impeccably. Next item, the refined leaders embrace inner and outer conflict with grace. I'm starting up another business aside from this one right now, and I was just talking with a dealer right now, and a dealer from a car dealership, because I'm going to go rent out, potentially lease, potentially finance out a vehicle. And something that I noticed, I found myself doing something which I've always been kind of surrounding myself with a lot of influences that knew how to negotiate really well, how to communicate really effectively. And what I found myself doing was embracing external conflict. Because a lot of people like to shy away from having any sort of conflict because they think that they're trying to get in a fight or something. I'm not trying to get in a fight. I just need to be able to stand for what I represent. And sometimes the company policy or just what someone else wants, they're just going to push right past you. And I was talking with a good friend of mine the other day that sometimes you can't just have good intentions and say what you want. Sometimes when the world pushes you, you have to push back to the side and push back with your arm back on that entity. And that gets into conflict sometimes. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean that you're trying to get in the fights. It means you're standing up for something. And when you're standing up for something, the same time someone else is standing up for something, sometimes there gets to be a little friction. The refined leader is comfortable with a little friction. They're okay with it. It doesn't mean that they become overly erratic. It doesn't turn them into a bad person. They're just saying, I need to stand for what I'm standing for. They look for the win-win solution and then decide how to continue pushing when they don't get that win-win solution. To be able to do this right from the get-go, an exercise to start doing is start getting comfortable with your inner conflict. If you've said that you're going to go do something and you don't feel like doing it, you're now at an impasse. You're at an inner conflict. It doesn't feel good to do the thing that you've set out for yourself to go do. You've set an explicit driver, an explicit goal, and it's being thwarted. It's getting in the way by an internal driver that wants you to do something else. Getting up early for the gym is the external driver. The staying in bed for a couple extra hours so you can feel more well-rested is the internal driver. You have to decide who wins those games, but that is a good example of internal conflict. Anytime you allow the inner driver to win, you're opting out of conflict. Anytime you use your external driver, which is to get up early for the gym, you're really pushing up against that. To be comfortable with that internal conflict is really, really important. To be comfortable with that internal conflict means that you could be more comfortable with external conflict. When you're comfortable with external conflict, that means that in order to go get into conflict, you don't see it. The thought that you put in your head is not, oh, I'm here to go and destroy this person, or, oh, this person offended who I was as an individual, so now I have to push back hard against it. It doesn't mean that at all. It just means that you're standing up for something that you believe in, and you're going to continue pushing for it until you get it, or until you find a different permutation, which works better for the two of you working together. That's all negotiation is literally just standing up for something that you believe in. And if you don't stand up for something you believe in, expect to be walked all over, or for people to talk over you, or for them to not acknowledge important things that you're saying, you do have to be able to be comfortable with stating what you want to say and stating it loudly so that someone actually understands what you're saying and they know that you mean business. And when they know you mean business, now they get to start taking you seriously, because maybe that's all they needed, is that you thought it was more serious than what you communicated it to be. So really important that type of leader is okay with conflict. They're not delaying the conflict. They're not avoiding it. They are going into it, because to be able to embrace that conflict, it allows you to be a more honest person, to be honest. It allows you to get the frictions out of the way earlier on in the relationship, so you're not having to go lie and continue to carry a lie and try to put up with something that you really don't want to put up with simply because you weren't okay with conflict. Please go and do this, especially if you're an agreeable person. Please go and embrace conflict in this way. Otherwise, the world is just going to go belong to the very disagreeable people, the very non-agreeable people that want to go just tell everyone what to do and just everything's their way or the highway. And then the agreeable people just try to put up with it just to kind of appease their emotions. Okay, don't let those people go rule the world. You have better empathy than they do. Start embracing those little moments of conflict. Speaking of conflict, the refined leader is able to understand human emotion and exhibit complete emotional control. Emotional control is not to be confused with emotionless. Okay, emotionless is someone that is decided to suffocate their emotions so much because they've decided that the world has decided it's too much for the world to handle. You want to be in control of your emotions, which means that when someone gets up in your face, that you can be angry and you know how to control that. It means that when you feel like you've lost something massive, and you feel hurt by it, that you take the opportunity to channel that emotion into being by yourself, or taking that emotion to get close to other loved ones. That's an emotion that's intended for actually bonding. It's actually tribal behavior. When you lose something, when you feel sad about something, that's a real trigger to connect with people that are closest to you. Another one is anxiety. Anxiety turns on when you want to go into something and then you feel your body sort of shaking because for some reason or another it's important. It's either important or you feel like it's tied to some outcome that if you didn't get the outcome that there's going to be severe consequences of some sort. Okay? The James Lang model, William James and Carl Lang discovered that emotions were not so much about the physiological experience of something, from the shaking or the, if your face turns red from being too angry. It's the interpretation of the physiological responses. Whereas you feel sad because you determined that you feeling down is actually a sad response, or you're shaking, so you'd say, oh, I'm nervous or I'm anxious because you're interpreting the shaking as an anxious response. This is a perfect opportunity to turn this around, because the shaking response could be my body is firing on all cylinders right now because it knows that this is an important opportunity. Because it's an important opportunity means that this is a lot to be looking forward to. Not everyone gets to feel this way. You have the privilege of feeling this way. You could easily interpret as being an excited emotion, something you're looking forward to, and this, what your body is doing, is working for you by saying, hey, turn all this shit on right now so you can be geared up and ready for whatever is about to come, because you're going to need it, because it's a big deal. Okay, that's a very, very, very different interpretation of the shakes. It's one that's very hopeful and one that actually helps you, not necessarily the one that says I'm anxious and now it's gonna affect my performance and then maybe I should try to shy away from it. Completely different. This is what emotional control is. Emotional control means taking those shakes and then gearing it towards, how do I channel this into something that's going to be useful for me? So that's what emotional control is, knowing how to channel those emotions effectively, not only to help you, but to help other people around you get with the picture. All these emotions you have, they're not your enemies. They're actually extremely useful if they're used in the right ways. So you have to know how to use them in the right ways. I go into each of these characteristics in a lot of detail inside this manual. Again, go click the link in the bio or go send me the email. I'm not sure what I'm going to put in the bio, but go check it out. Go check out down there and see what I did, because it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be extremely useful. I also talk about my life in there just a little bit as well, so you know where all this is coming from. But if you skip over to the last section, you're going to learn actually some practical tools to start using in order to go and become the refined leader. So let me briefly talk about my methodology before I give you a couple tools. My methodology for creating the refined leader is building someone from the ground up. I believe in taking someone who is ambitious, has a lot of energy, has a lot of ambition and energy, and a strong work ethic, and is willing to build all those things for that matter as well. Because it's one thing to want all those things, but it's another thing that maybe you don't have a strong work ethic, or maybe you're not nearly as ambitious, but you could do better, or it means that you're not as excited, but you want to be more excited. I want to take those people and I want to refine them into leaders, and I do it in a 3-step process. Step 1, I'm calling execution. The refined leader needs to have a level of respect and expertise and execution. They need to learn how to learn effectively. They need to be able to take their resources and be able to build something on their own. And this is honestly where everyone starts, whether it's your first job at a company, or if it's your first time entering into a new field, or if it's your first time actually trying to step your game up to be an A player on your team, and to identify yourself as an A player on your team, and to let the people around you know that you're the A+ player that can come up and be, that closer, or like Tim Grover says, that cleaner who actually gets the job done. There's specific things you need to do in order to be that person. But before someone is a leader, they have to be the most competent person on the team before anything else happens. They have to learn how to master that aspect first to be an effective executor before anything else. And then they could start going to, thinking about leadership items. So phase 1 is about execution. You'll notice on this channel and going forward and on my future programs, I'm going to be talking a lot about how to be a specialist, learning how to learn effectively, how to execute things in a high level, how to recruit your focus in the right way so you know what things to focus on at what points during the day. You don't want to be running around being the person with 3 different jobs and you're saying, I can't make enough to keep up with everything. You want to be the person that works for maybe 4 hours a day and is able to accomplish 10 hours worth of productivity. A lot of people think about productivity in terms of the effort they put in as opposed to what comes out towards a specific outcome. If you can start thinking like that, you now have leverage, and it's very, very easy for you to become an A+ player in your organization. So to be a refined leader, we work together on being an effective executor. Someone who takes action. How tough is it for people to take action these days? You want it, you don't do it. I know the neuroscience and the psychology behind this. I've worked with hundreds of people about this before, to get someone to go take action and consistently on something for an extended period of time, to a point where in previous programs, I've set 3-month goals with clients, and there was one program where I got them up to an 80% success rate, which really was about 100%, because 80% of the clients actually tried in the first place. So if you were a client that actually tried in the first place, you consistently got to a 3-month goal. This is something I've always done throughout my life. I love New Year's resolutions because I actually follow through with them. I don't know if it was magic or an accident or if it's something I just learned to develop correctly over time where I had the right influences around me. I know how to consistently hit targets, to hit goals, and to work on develop an expertise at a wide variety of different crafts. And I want to teach you how to do that too. That's just step one. You can stop there and you can be the greatest specialist in the world in your particular region. You know, you can be the one person athlete, you could be the world champion at that, and you could be good, okay? That's all it would take. But what I've learned is that the most amazing things on the planet were always accomplished in teams. The super team will beat the Superman every single time in every single battle. You know, I would place a bet every single time on 2/1, on 3/2, on 10/4, whatever that is. If there's more people and they're working together, they're going to get a whole lot more done than any individual could possibly do on their own, which leads me to phase two. Phase two of developing the refined leader is communication. You want to be a world-class communicator. A world-class communicator without any skill, honestly, is a manipulator, you know, because they can go and cast magic spells. You know, we don't see them as magic spells these days, but they say certain words and they're very compelling that they can convey themselves as being like this amazing person. Imagine what happens if you are an A player, an effective executor on your team, in your life, in every single aspect, and you can communicate that value. You become quite a vicious individual. You now have even more leverage than you did from before. Naval Ravikant, you know, one of the greater investors that's alive today, talks about, you know, if you want to make wealth in this day and age, you need to have leverage. You know, you can acquire leverage through one or two things. You could do it through code, which is the form of software, or you could do it in the form of communication, which is in the form of you actually speaking on a medium to a wide variety of number of people. I'm reaching hundreds of people right now, and maybe by the time, you know, this video is, you know, all said and done, maybe thousands have watched this video because it's applied something, spoke to something like really, really core to what the human is. And that is why I want to take time to actually develop communication in these refined leaders. They need to know the spoken word. They need to know the written word. They need to know human emotions and emotional intelligence, and this is a topic that's not very talked about, but cultural intelligence. A lot of people think about cultural intelligence like, oh, are they from, you know, Pakistan or Germany or Japan or India? Where are they coming from? It's not just that. Cultural intelligence means, are they from the Midwest? Are they a Gen Z or a millennial? Did they come from a different industry than I did? Am I talking to someone who is in a different industry than I am? Do I need to speak a different language because of the people that are around them? You know, am I talking to someone because I can understand and empathize what their life looks like on a day-to-day basis and know I'm the next person that gets to go interact with them? When you can understand what someone's life looks like from when they wake up to go until they go to sleep, it makes a whole lot of sense why an irrational person actually is behaving very irrationally. So to be an effective communicator, I need to know who that person is, what their emotions are, what human emotion is, and how to effectively communicate to that person using their language. And that's what makes communication so difficult and makes it such a nuanced craft. But when it's done correctly, you can actually be, you know, not very useful at all. And for any skill set you didn't collect while you're becoming an effective executor, you picked up by being an effective communicator. You made up for it by being an effective public speaker, to be able to communicate to a wide variety of different people, to collect all that social status, and be able to do something which for a lot of people is their number one fear, which is public speaking. How to relax your voice in a way that you can actually deepen your connection with the people around you. How to negotiate effectively to make sure that whatever it is you're acquiring as the resources around you, you're paying the right price for it. You don't want to be overpaying, and furthermore, you don't want to be underpaying either, because there's unique consequences to that. To be an effective communicator, you need to know what value is, what people value. You need to know how to communicate your product, your service, you as an individual to other people so that it's valuable. Communicate to other people on a massive scale. That's called marketing, to be an effective marketer in that way. You need to be able to communicate it to move someone to action on a one-on-one basis. That's called sales. If you don't have negotiation, marketing, or sales, you don't have a business. Someone's got to go bring the money in. You know, as much as you could be a business builder, someone has to go and bring the money in at the same time, which if you expect to step out of that specialist role which would keep you stuck on a working per hour basis, and you want to start working on a more leverage basis where you get to be working not so much on how many hours you spent per day, but rather how many people you have reporting to you and how many systems you have them working on, you need to be an effective communicator. You need to understand what someone is saying to you when they're saying it, because there's always the surface level thing of what they're saying, and then there's always the thing that's right beneath that you need to understand as well. And you need to know how to speak to both of those things, because most people, I guarantee you, are not speaking to those deeper aspects of who that person is. And then last but not least, you need to understand leadership. Actual leadership, the nuts and bolts of what being a leader actually is. And that's phase 3, is leadership. So execution, communication, leadership. Leadership means you've mastered how to create value through execution. You've mastered how to communicate with other people through communication. Now you need to understand, how do you organize the team? Who needs to be working together? Who needs to be working separately? How do you gauge and gate the information that is passed back and forth from different parties in such a way that for relatively little amount of work from every individual, you're able to acquire massive outcomes. The better you're able to do this, the more profits you can go generate. Because, in the words of Thomas Sowell, and I believe the definition was taken elsewhere, profit is not just extra money in your pocket after you've paid all of your expenses from your revenue. Profit, from an economic standpoint, is the price an economy pays you to be more efficient. If you can find ways of being more efficient, you can keep more money in your pocket. If you want to do that, you have to find lots of people, help them accomplish their goals in your team, and then collect a small extra portion of their labors in the form of profits in your pocket. If you can properly incentivize people, if you can create a culture, an environment that people want to be a part of, a winning environment that people want to be a part of so they can enjoy their life, they can live their lifestyle, they can hang out with their friends, but you can also use their labors and their efforts to go build your business, that's what leadership is. You need to know how to actually bring people on board. First who, then what? Which people are you bringing into the organization? You need to know how to create that culture, how to consistently reward certain things and consistently punish certain things. You need to know at what point do we need to expand, or at what point do we need to, build up our cash coffers instead and just remain, remain steady with just keeping the system running. You need to know how to use people to actually generate new ideas, because a group of people can generate a lot more ideas than any one person can on their own. You need to know how to strategically deploy these people. You want to know that given one group of people, how do you refine yourself and adapt in such a way that you can most effectively lead that group of people? Because I tell you this, most managers will walk around saying, well, if I had these resources, and if I had these resources, I had like this talent right here, and I was recruiting from this school or from this company, then I would be, then everything would be on easy mode, okay? The fact of reality is that's not reality. That's not reality at all. The refined leader says, how do I take the situation I'm in, and how do I make it work? How do I make it work in such a way that almost I'd rather it be this way? And that's a tough thing to do. And that's just someone who understands that there are economics to reality. You don't have, the brand value yet. You don't have the leverage of getting there. But you know how to use your time and use the time of other people to start building it. And in the meantime, taking the people around you and cultivating them to fill those roles. So without further ado, I've been kind of holding you guys on by a string here. But I'm going to give you some actual exercises for actually implementing some of these items related to developing the refined leader, the characteristics I've already mentioned in the past couple of videos, through the lens of execution, communication, and through actual leadership skills. Any of these exercises I come up with, I want to have a couple rules for. One is that you will experience results alone simply by just engaging with me. If you chose not to do anything at all, but you just listen to these videos, I guarantee you're going to be a much better leader simply just by being here and being exposed to my content here. I've done this consistently in the past. I guarantee you that's probably been the case so far, that you're already a better leader simply just by listening and just being exposed to some of these new ideas. So that's one. Rule number 2 is that you will get results from engaging with the exercises, even if you understand a fraction of why they work. You don't need to understand completely how it works. If you understand even just a little bit, just by doing the exercises, you're going to start getting a lot more results than you did from before. The third is that these exercises are not intended to be done separately. They're intended to be done in your actual work stream because you're in the middle of actually doing stuff. Like athletes train 95% of their life and spend 5% of it in actual performance. People in business spend about 5% of their lives like actually, training and 95% in performance. That's the reality, So as much as I could ask you to go sit down and do all these additional exercises that takes additional time, I'd much rather you just keep in performance mode and just keep executing what you're doing and just making little tweaks at a time, very much in the spirit of refined leadership, is to make slight tweaks moment by moment to living more impeccably, to embracing that refined identity of the person you want to be, understanding the life that person builds, and then understanding the habits and influences you must enact in order to get closer to that life. All this happens on a moment-to-moment basis. And if there's any other exercises that are outside of the actual work environment, they will be done in competition format. For a simple reason, iron sharpens iron. People get better in the form of competition. That will come a lot later. Stay tuned for that. But without further ado, here are a couple of exercises to actually go implement right away to start becoming more like the refined leader. The first one is the refined detox. We'll take 1 week in one of these programs to actually detox everything negative that you're putting into your body, anything negative that you're putting into your mind, anything negative you're even entertaining in the first place. And we do this simply by just starting to clean your room. Cleaning up your room and simply just reorganizing your space. Very simple way of going about this. We'll go cover this later on. But if you're listening to this right now, a simple way to instantly improve your life that a lot of people are just leaving, they're honestly leaving it hanging right now because it's so easy, is not one, clean your room, but two, reorganize your desk. Reorganize your work environment. If you're facing in one direction, reorient your desk in a different environment. If your computer is on the left side, move it to the right side. If you typically like to sit when you're working, try standing instead. Shift your environment around just to shake things up. When you do this, after kind of cleaning up the space around you, when you're able to do this, what this does, it gives your brain an opportunity to try something new. It's novel. There's some hope behind it. Maybe you can go shift something around. In order to open yourself to make some of the shifts and the changes I'm going to recommend, you need to be open-minded to making those changes and simply cleaning up your space, cleaning up the things you put into your body, and reorganizing the environment around you. You'll immediately notice that there's a shift in your environment, and that allows you an opportunity, ample opportunity, to see that things can actually be far different, and you could follow your intuition and instinct. You could work with me to figure out what is the best orientation of your actual space. This sounds like something that's not how is this going to affect me at all? You'd be shocked to see how much people would work more or less based on just the orientation of their living spaces and the orientation of their workplaces. So it's something to definitely keep in mind about. So start cleaning up that clutter. If you don't need it or you haven't used it, get rid of it. I'll give you a more detailed process inside of the Refined Leadership Blueprint. Again, it's in the description. Go click on it to go see that whole article. The next technique are incremental substitutions towards impeccable outcomes. There's many things that you want to start doing with your life. I understand that. There's many different ways you've been procrastinating on those things that you want to go do with your life. Simply remember this mantra: how can I live more impeccably in this moment? Or simply just to live impeccably. Whenever I declare to myself to live impeccably, what that does, it invites me to look for an opportunity to make a small shift. I should be able to shift something that takes no more than 30 seconds to go do. Or I should be able to shift something that takes no more than 1 minute to go do. Here are a couple of examples. Simply standing up more straight. Simply projecting your voice or deepening your voice about 10% more than what you usually do. Another example is, what are things I could do in the next 30 seconds that would get me closer to whatever my goal is? Maybe something you could do is, can I knock off 10 or 12 different checklist items that could be done very, very quickly? Or maybe 1 or 2 items that could be done very quickly. One of these things could be, how can I organize my schedule in a way that's easier for me to go follow the next time I go see it, if you haven't been following it especially, or how do I get rid of it if I haven't been following it? Another thing is, well, if I were to start actually engaging with an expertise I've been wanting to go develop, what would be the first thing for me to start doing? Do I need to start shopping for different books? Do I need to be watching certain videos? Do I need to be hiring certain experts? What can I do in this moment to move me one step closer to that? Which that might be as simple as going to a website where I could find these books, or going to a website where I could watch these videos, or going to a website where I might find an expert to actually help me on these certain things. You need to understand these big steps that you want to go take that you might be procrastinating simply because they're too big. You want to reduce it down to the smallest step possible, and then have an internal culture, an internal consciousness where you're consistently improving upon the presence of the moment. And the exercise in this incremental substitution towards your impeccable outcomes literally is through the incantation of, how do I live more impeccably in this present moment? And you just allow that voice to come back up and say, what am I supposed to do? Which, that's a little bit of a nuance in there. How can you actually improve upon this moment? You're asking yourself a question. How can I improve upon this moment to become more impeccable? And for me, in this case, it might be, okay, probably I could spend more time looking at the camera. Or maybe I could spend time slowing down. Maybe the voice says, hey, actually, maybe go simplify the topic just a little bit, just to go collect the audience members that might be a little confused right now. I sincerely doubt it, but you never know who shows up on these videos. So when you ask the question is answered with your gut instinct. And you want to take seriously what that gut instinct gives you. It might give you something pretty bizarre, like, hey, call your mother, or go hang out with a sibling of yours. Or it might be, hey, perhaps I need to go and, reach out to someone that I need to talk to in order to get an important business question answered. Whatever that voice tells you, go listen to it and keep asking it over and over and over again. You'd be surprised at what you can get done in a day in this method simply by asking the question and making sure that whatever task you give yourself to do, it's really, really small and really easy to do. So that's the exercise. So in a nutshell, the exercise of incremental substitutions towards impeccable outcomes. 1, ask yourself the question, how do I live more impeccably in this moment? 2, wait for an answer. And then 3, do whatever the answer tells you to do, no matter what. In fact, go and do the easiest version of whatever that answer is, so you can start moving in that general direction. Start developing a momentum to going towards your dreams. You got to do it. You can't do the big things overnight, so you have to start with the small things and start stacking them up pretty aggressively. The next one is the refined morning routine. Everyone talks about morning routines, and they have a very, very regimented schedule about what to do, and has 300 to 400 to 500 different items. I'm exaggerating, but in many cases it could be like 10 or 20 different things that they have to go do, and people don't follow it. Let me help you out. If you're trying to do a morning routine and you're not following it consistently, it's not the refined morning routine. The refined morning routine is simple. Start with one thing you could do at the very start of your morning every single day. Mine is go take a shower. So I wake up and I go take a shower. It's like an automatic response. I had to train it after some time, but my morning routine, I start off with something simple, which is wake up and go take a shower. What you want to do is each day you wake up is encourage yourself to see if you get to a place where, how do I get into a state of consciousness of optimal performance? You already know the answers to these questions, but if you don't, that's something we can go talk about later on. But the goal of the morning routine is to get you into the state of optimal performance. The refined morning routine is simple. You want to take the steps that you do, and you want to get rid of anything that doesn't get you into an optimal state of performance, and add in anything that does add you to the optimal state of performance, and just keep it there. That's all you need to do. The refined morning routine is this, is you build one item at a time to get you into that state of optimal performance. That's it. So mine is actually pretty simple. I wake up, I go take a shower, I brush my teeth, and while I'm brushing my teeth, I begin to make coffee. I sit down and do some breath work, and then I'm already into my checklist. My checklist is part of what I like to call the refined workflow. So there's no break in continuity between my routine and the actual workflow. So yes, do I do other things like maybe take a cold shower instead? Sometimes I do that, but it doesn't distract me from the fact that I have a very base routine. Wake up, shower, brush my teeth, coffee, sit down, breath work, go into the refined workflow, which I'll talk about in just a second. This is related to the actual execution side of becoming the refined leader, because it's in the execution that you can actually garner that sort of intelligence and be able to gather that level of respect that you need in order to get that sort of attention that makes you deserving of having that leadership position. No one's just going to put you in that position because like they just like you a lot. They're going to put you there because you're the best person for the job and they like you a little bit and they trust you more than anything else. Anytime I've gotten a leadership position in my life, which has been rather continuous at this point, I can identify it's halfway because I was really, really good at my role. Two, because I really got down to the identity of that organization, what the goal of that organization was. And I made sure to act in such a way to play out that organization's goals. And I acted in such a way that people could trust me to go do so. And they liked me enough that they said, you know what, this makes a lot of sense. So again, that's for another video. But the refined morning routine, what I encourage you to do is scrap your entire morning routine and start with one thing that you can do consistently every day. One day you will go and do the thing you're consistently doing, and then you're going to add a second thing, and you'll continue doing that every day. Guess what? If you stop doing that second thing, probably isn't a good thing to do consistently, because if you can't do it consistently, it's not going to get done. And a lot of people say, yeah, you got to do it for 14 days before it's consistent. I want to do things that feel good to do in the morning, and through doing those things, I want to put myself in that optimal state of performance, and you should too. So enough of these like stacked up morning routines and make it super simple. Think about one, what things do I need to do to get myself into a state of optimal performance? Two, start day one with just one of those things that you can consistently do every single day. Start adding in other things, and then start removing things that aren't adding into that state of optimal performance. This is the magic of systems. Systems are really, really hard for you to get them to behave in the way that you want them to go and behave. And for that reason, you want to keep systems extremely simple and give a lot of leeway for you to mix and match, to kind of dance around what you need to dance around with. Because if it's too strict, I'll tell you what happens. You find yourself not doing it, then you don't want to do it even more, then you'll want to do it even more, and then it's gone. Okay, a simple system that can be applied every single day, rain or shine, no matter if it's a good day or a bad day, that's the system that wins. So the refined morning routine, make it really, really simple. Have one thing you always do the moment you wake up without fail. Add only one thing, one day at a time, in the realm of incremental substitution. Keep it simple enough that it can be done even on your worst days. For when you have a routine that allows you consistently get into that work mode, that state of optimal performance, stop adding to it. And then 5, consider removing steps if needed. Sometimes less is more. In fact, the best refined morning routine is the one where there's no steps, where you get up and you go right to work. And if you could do that, I'd encourage you, that's what your routine looks like. Forget all the other nonsense. Just do that. If you discover that doesn't work, figure out the things that you need to do and get rid of anything that might be, anything that someone recommends or a guru says is a good idea, or say, oh, all champions do this thing every single day. Stop that shit. Find out what you need, you specifically, to get in that state of optimal performance, and just do that and make it as simple as possible. So that's a refined morning routine. The next one is the refined workflow. I'm getting close to an hour here, so I'm going to move along a little bit more quickly here. The refined workflow is a cadence of working. How many of you have sat down and you said, hey, let's go work on this task all day long without breaks? It's doable. It's fine. There's a justification to say that if you want to go and run a marathon, for example, you just run continuously the whole time. That can take a very long time to do. It takes a lot of training to get to that place. However, what the brain really likes to do is to take short sprints and then little breaks in between. Short sprints and little breaks in between. This is especially useful if you find yourself with very, very complex work that requires you to learn a lot, that requires you to make a lot of decisions, that requires you to use a lot of mental bandwidth and capacity, anything that you're not used to that generates a lot of emotions. You want to have this type of workflow, which I'm calling the refined workflow. This is an adaptation of the Pomodoro technique, which was introduced to the world back in the 1970s, 1980s, I believe the 1980s. The method worked simply like this. Work for 25 minutes, take a break for 5 minutes. He used a Pomodoro timer, which is like a tomato timer, to actually time himself. And he found that he could get himself in a state of an optimal workflow like that. Okay, a lot has changed since that method was actually instituted, including the introduction of the information age, which has just ruined all of our minds and made us perpetually distracted to a point where 25 minutes of work is no more 25 minutes of work followed by a 5-minute break. It's 25 minutes of work which might be interrupted with some distractions that are coming from all around you, plus 5 minutes of being more distracted on your cell phone or on your devices or anything else that could pull your attention away. Those 5-minute breaks are no longer 5-minute breaks. Those 5 minutes of your brain still working hard. It doesn't work the same way, and this is typically what people do. The adaptation on this is really simple. Work for 25 minutes. Pick one task you're going to do, ideally that whole day. Because a huge problem that's robbing a lot of people's mental bandwidth and energy is task switching their brain into different modes. It acquires a lot of something called attentional residue, which means that even though if you're focused on a new thing, a part of your brain is still stuck on something else from before. This is another reason why you want to clean your room, because even if your brain picks up little bits of clutter around you, this might be a little OCD. I don't think I'm OCD, but if it picks up a little clutter around you, it's perpetually distracted by those items of clutter, which is why it feels so good when you clean up your space and it feels just fresh and easy. When you go and do that, it makes it a whole lot easier to focus on things because your mental bandwidth is not being taken up by something else. So the same way that takes up potential residue, whatever you were just working on is also picking up attentional residue as well. So the less you could switch tasks around, the better. So ideally, you want to have one task that you do throughout the day. Okay? Again, this is new research. This is research that came out in the past couple of decades, whereas the Pomodoro timer method came back in the 1980s. I'm just innovating upon it with the research and the technology that's available today. Pick one task you're going to do for the whole day. Set a timer for 25 minutes and work on it. When the timer goes off, for those 5 minutes, stop working and close your eyes. Okay? Literally close your eyes. What you want to do is gate your senses. If anything, you want to cover up your senses. Close your eyes actually. I have these headphones right here. I'll put on like these headphones right here so I could actually cover up my ears as well, so I'm not processing visual information. So I'm not processing auditory information. I'm giving my brain a true rest during that time period. And while doing that, you'll notice something really interesting happening. In those 5 minutes, especially if you're typically on your phone or you're typically distracted or switching tasks a lot, you'll find you are starting to accrue this beautiful emotion called boredom. When's the last time you felt really bored about something? We don't get to be bored anymore. That boredom was really important to allow your brain to go and reset itself, to go into that default mode network so you could be more creative, but more importantly, so your brain can heal itself so you can go back for the next 25 minutes. So that's that. You want to gate all of your senses and close your eyes for 5 minutes and allow that boredom to build up. The more boredom that builds up in that time period, the better. Because the moment you open your eyes and you're back to work, whatever you thought was boring or complex or tough is now the most exciting thing right now. And you get to go back into it. What should happen here is your brain flips into a flow state. Now that you have the struggle phase and you had a time to rest, going back into it, your brain releases chemicals now that actually put you inside that state of optimal performance, which is really, really cool when you could do this right. So you work in the next 25 minutes. After that goes off, you could either take a break for 5 minutes, again, if you feel like you need it. But if you feel like you just want to plow past it and just blow past it and keep going, set a timer for 2 hours instead. And just keep going for the next 2 hours. And then after those 2 hours, you can go, close your eyes again for 5 minutes. You'd be shocked that you can actually be in a state of flow of optimal performance throughout the whole day with this methodology. A lot of people actually struggle actually getting into that flow state, which is really that state of optimal performance. This actually gets you in there and keeps you there, so that after those 2 hours, you can close your eyes for 5 minutes. After you open up again, 25 minutes. If you could still keep going, again, 2 hours, push it for 2 hours. If you can't keep going, then do 25 minutes instead. And just keep doing that until, you get towards the part of the day where you actually need to start winding down. What I like to do is I will stop 1 hour before sleeping. In this way, I could work all day long. And honestly, I get more done in a day than most people will do in an entire month like this. If I could be focused on one task that day and to keep this flow of focus and work throughout the day. Sometimes, because you have neurochemicals like dopamine and serotonin like rushing through your body while you're doing this, you actually forget to eat at certain times during the day. So if you really wanted to take advantage of intermittent fasting, this would be a time to go do that in a way that you're not consistently distracted by hunger or things like that, because you're consistently engaged with it and your neurochemicals are actually pumping up the same way it would otherwise do for food or for something else entirely. But I want to stop everything 1 hour before sleeping so that I can give my brain a chance to actually slow down. Because if it keeps going, you're not going to sleep well, and that's just going to lead into no sleep and no sleep for the next day. It just makes it really, really hard to be consistent with it. But I'll stop 1 hour before sleeping, turn off all devices, and I will just allow myself to exist in that 1 hour. If possible, I'll go into these things I call restorative environments, which is, places that have a lot of space, a lot of nature. I have a lot of agency with it. Agency means I can move around. It's like taking a fish out of a small fish bowl and put it into a huge fish bowl. It just feels good and restorative. Perhaps I'll walk around with it. I like to be in places that have a lot of awe, where I could get a huge view, where there's a lot of water, a lot of, natural elements around me. If it's a city, that's fine too, because there's some sense of amazement behind it. This gives me an opportunity to, slow things down. Potentially another hot shower to, again, calm down my system. And then I take whatever supplements I take to go and sleep. And then I have literally a perfect day while doing this. And then when I wake up the next day, I get to do the exact same thing tomorrow, from the refined morning routine all the way through the refined workflow. There's not a single break in my day that isn't controlled for. And in this way, I get to incrementally go build up a day that is literally perfect. And I could really go develop an expertise. Whereas a lot of people take many years to do it, I could do it in literally a couple of months. And I've done it consistently before, and I'll do it again. So that's the refined workflow. Really, really useful for working on the execution component. I have a technique called separation of the mind and body from the self, which involves if you want to actually go and do something really, really tough, to actually separate yourself from your actual body. And there's a very simple way of doing this. The way of going about this is simply closing your eyes and literally identifying yourself with the silent observer. So you can close your eyes and you can imagine this right now. You can imagine yourself as you in your body, but then you could see that there's maybe another version of you that doesn't feel pain, that doesn't feel emotion, it doesn't feel anything at all, but it's just like silently watching you from a distance, almost as if it was right above you, just watching you. And you're looking at your body and your mind and your whole everything as if it were something else, and you're having this weird out-of-body experience. This is a really, really fascinating phenomenon because it actually distances you from your ego. It distances you from the pain that you experience in your body. In my Refined Leadership Blueprint, again, go in the description to go click on that link to go get access to that article. It's 100 pages long. It's amazingly valuable. I'm just giving it away for free right now. It won't always be that way, but I'm giving it to you for free since you're watching this early on. If you go and do this, you can actually put your hand in ice cold water and you won't feel pain. You'll feel uncomfortable, of course, because it's ice cold, right? But you don't feel pain or suffering from it if you stay in that state of consciousness. This is really, really useful if you need to do something which is tough, is hard, it's painful, and you're doing it for the very first time. Okay, I'd encourage you to try practicing that. Go get a bucket, fill it with water and ice. Make sure it's ice cold. Close your eyes, Identify with that silent observer that's just watching you as if you're watching someone else. Induce your own out-of-body experience, and then simply put your hand in the water and stay in that zone. Stay in that zone of being out of body. You'll feel yourself coming back into it. You're like, this hurts. But no, stay as that person that watches silently from a distance. And you'd be shocked what you can get away with pain-wise. You can get yourself to do all sorts of crazy things that you've never done before, especially when you're doing it for the very first time. I like to do this anytime I'm doing something which is extremely uncomfortable, which is very anxiety inducing, that I'm not used to doing, and I need to start doing it consistently in order to get a result. I will actually slow down. I will pause. I'll stop. I will close my eyes. I will watch myself from a distance as if I was watching someone else, and I will identify with that silent observer. And then from that place, I will go and engage whatever uncomfortable activity that is. Give it a try. Tell me how it went in the comment box. Tell me how it goes, and then we'll go tweak it from there. Okay? This whole game is about refination. It's about is refination even a word? It's about refinement. That's the correct word. This whole game is about refinement. We need to tweak it until it's perfect. And then when it gets perfect, we need to tweak it some more so it stays perfect. And that's just the name of the game. You start going to the gym, you build a body, you get really tough. You stop going to the gym, you don't get any tough anymore. It's a game of refinement forever, as long as you want to actually stay in that place. Another one, kind of shifting over into the communication side of things. I opened this video with this technique, is just be 10% louder than you usually are. Example, 10% louder than what you usually are. You will convey a lot more authority and presence to someone, especially if they're not used to listening to you already. You'll be shocked at the type of attention that you'll get from this and the type of respect that you'll garner from people around you simply by changing the tone of your voice. 10% louder, 10% deeper. Go give that a try right away. Just see what happens. If you want to really force it, do 20% louder, 20% deeper. See how the people around you interact with you. See how they start looking in your direction. If you were to go over in their direction and introduce yourself, or say, hey, how's your day going, or anything, or just whatever that's going to be, or comment on something, you'd be surprised how easy it is to get in conversation, because there's a level of authority and value that you're communicating simply by allowing yourself to actually create space in that environment by increasing the volume of your voice and the depth of your voice as well. So as far as the communication side of things go, that's really useful. Another one is free association to access 100% of your brain. I talked about this in Brilliant Communication, my video from a couple weeks back. You can go check that out. But it's free association to access 100% of your brain. You simply sit down and you just keep talking after writing down a question, asking yourself a question the night before, writing it down on a piece of paper. What's the best way of making money for me right now? And then when you wake up, the moment you wake up, look back at that question and simply start speaking. Start speaking continuously. Don't allow yourself to stop speaking. What this does, it trains you to be a more easier speaker when it comes to improvising. In case you don't know, all these videos right here, I'm completely improvising right now. I'm actually just going off of the top of my head about how to actually communicate thoughts. Yes, it has the advantage of being more natural. It does carry sometimes a disadvantage, or sometimes lose a train of thought, or maybe that's a point that wasn't worth covering. In any case, what it does, it allows me to access parts of my brain I didn't know were there, to access information that is actually really valuable that I couldn't figure out if I just sat down and just described it to you. So write down a question, start talking continuously to answer that question, and then after about 10 minutes, stop the timer and go back and see if there was any useful bits of information that came out. If they felt like there was a bit of information that came out that's worth writing down, write it down really quickly so you can go log it down. So that's one thing about communication. And it also makes you a better public speaker. Just by practicing that exercise over and over again, you start getting used to the idea of the sound of your own voice and the cadence by which you get to go and speak. And then you could start refining things from there. Moving on to the leadership aspect of things, which is a lot more exercise with each of these things, but I just want to scrape the surface here. With the leadership aspect of things, the 3 A's that create connection. All right, if I can attribute one set of behavioral attributes that allowed me to create connection with other people, such that they liked me, they respected me, and they wanted to put me in charge of certain things, which has happened so consistently throughout my life, from back in high school to college, the various groups I was in college to after graduating, how I rose up quickly in my corporate organization back in the consulting firm that I worked in those couple Fortune 500 companies for, Fortune 200 companies actually, and then how I was able to build up those couple of business to multiple $1 million per year, to having key roles in those businesses. I just keep getting brought up to the top of the organization in these organizations for a lot of different reasons, but which is actually really useful if you want to get promoted within a particular organization. It's not in your heart to start your own business. To do this is actually a really useful skill set. If there's one sort of behavioral attribute that I have, is I gave away my 3 A's. Okay, my 3 A's are really, really simple. It is acceptance, approval, and appreciation. That's it. Acceptance, approval, appreciation. Acceptance says it's okay for you to be here. I accept you to be in this environment that's around here. Okay, you could imagine that's one level of creating a connection, because you're looking at someone and saying, "Hey, it's okay for you to be in this space." Approval says, I invited you to be here and I condone this behavior that you're doing. So not only are you allowed in this space, but whatever it is you're doing is that's also really good. Keep up with that. That's another level of connection I'm developing by acknowledging something that someone is doing around me. And then third is appreciation. Appreciation means not I only accept and approve and condone the behavior that you're up to, but I also value it exceptionally. I appreciate the added efforts that you're putting in. I could see that you're doing that, and I see you're doing that for a particular reason. Maybe it's also an invitation to get connection with me. And I'm going to call that out. I'm going to say, I really, really appreciate that. Me doing that for everyone around me when I was sort of just a worker bee, back when I was a follower, back when I was just churning out results. This is what allowed me to go to that next stage, is just giving these things away like it was nothing. I would encourage you, for the people in your life, to extend a gesture of approval, of acceptance, of approval, of appreciation, just for nothing. See what happens. You're going to get one of two responses. One, the person's going to be super hesitant about it, like, what are you trying to get from me? Like, what are you asking for? Or this is strange. Or they'll find a way of making, getting out of the awkwardness of it, because a lot of people aren't used to it. And sometimes they're not used to it because whenever it happens, it's like, maybe they paid the price for doing that for the wrong people before. So you'll either get them acting in a very, weird, uncomfortable way, or the other response is typically like, hey, that was awesome. Thank you so much. And the connection actually gets stronger as a result of that. So you want to find yourself in a position where you're making more of these connections. Easiest way to give these connections is just to extend a compliment. But an easier way, a more fundamental way of doing so, is really acknowledging that person's existence in the form of acceptance, approval, or appreciation. So give away these 3 A's like it's candy on Halloween. Give it away like it's nothing, because in doing that, you're developing the connections that's required to actually get a lot of buy-in for connection that's required for effective leadership. Another one is radical honesty. I talked about this a couple of videos ago. I encourage you to check that one out. But actually practicing radical honesty, where you're more honest than you even need to be, it builds trust. Connection plus trust means that you can get a lot of compliance in terms of asking people to do certain things, and in terms of inviting them to be A players, to step out of their comfort zone to do something amazing. When you can create that environment in the form of acknowledging the good work that they're doing, in addition to actually being radically honest with them, full transparency about everything, even things you don't need to be honest about, be honest about those things. It does create some temporary frictions, but what it does, it creates longer-term trust. The same way that when you go to the gym, you create little micro tears in your muscles when you lift weights. What it does, it gives little micro conflicts to your muscles, but as a result of it, when it heals, it gets stronger. You don't want to try to lift up something heavy and then it just rips apart. You want to create little tiny bits of micro tears so that when they heal back up, the relationship gets stronger and stronger and stronger. So you want to demonstrate that by demonstrating radical honesty, especially when it's uncomfortable, because that's the form of creating those little micro tears. Another interesting technique that I'll have here, and this will be the last one, is to bestow the role. If there's something of someone that you want in your team, for example, you want someone to be an expert in a particular area, what you can do is start thanking them and showing pride and acceptance in the work that they did for that particular thing. So, for example, pay attention to how people communicate in your workplace or on your team. Figure out what sort of things people take pride in. Figure out what sort of things you need to have those people go and do. If you can find an overlap between what you need from someone and the type of work that they take pride in, that they actually like doing, you can actually say, this is the go-to person. You could say, hey, I saw you did this work, and I would announce it actually to the actual team that this person did this thing for my team. They actually saved the company $10,000. They saved me, 10 hours of additional work. I'm going to call that out to everyone and say, hey, quick shout out to this person for doing this particular thing. Because when someone sees them, they get appreciated for that work. They feel, nice and warm inside for it. It encourages them to want to do it more. And when they do it more, you go and bestow the role. I would say, hey, that's our person. That's our person that saves money for the company, or that's a person that adds efficiency, or this is the person that calls out bad ideas. Hey, is there any, bad ideas here that you can go call out? Keeps my hands clean because that person can actually go call it out. I can go protect them to make sure that they're the person that's actually able to call out bad ideas. Or, if it's a deficiency thing, I could say, hey, do you find any efficiencies here? And they'll take pride in continuing to go do that. In this way, you could go cultivate an expert in-house as long as you continuously encourage them and you reward them for doing certain things that you typically don't get encouraged or rewarded for doing. You could save yourself a ton of money and develop your own experts and your long-term retention employees in-house simply by providing them resources and providing them encouragement along the way. If there's one piece of things that, I guess guidance when I was really young that allowed me to do what I did is I just had encouragement along the way. And having those little bits of encouragement added up a lot more than any element of discouragement along the way. It's really hard for someone, the untrained mind, to really process discouragement. Because it just says that, hey, you're not good enough for this thing. Maybe you're not good enough for other things. Encouragement says, hey, you're really good at this thing. You might be good at all these other things too. But you have the ability of getting better at it. And these are the type of ways that the refined leader needs to think about. And that's a really good tool for you to actually go and utilize to go and make sure that you're building long-term retention employees, partners, contractors, teammates inside your organization. Going to go bestow the role like that and start incrementally including these different factors of acceptance, approval, and appreciation. The Refined Leadership Training Academy is a set of programs I'm in the middle of writing right now, and I encourage you to go and apply for these programs while in the middle of writing them, simply because I want to go and build the leader of tomorrow. I want to build the greatest leader the world has ever seen, and I want to do it through refined leadership. It's really, really tough for people to break into sort of this weird, how would I say, it's not even like a cult, it's like this weird mafia or this weird posse of people that seem to control the world and kind of hold everything by their puppet strings. And it's really hard to embrace the reality that we're in because these people are simply, they've gathered a lot of power, they've centralized it, and they're just telling people what to do with it. And, these people aren't the best people in the world. They're going to lead our world to demise. And I think that we ought to have a fighting chance. We all have a fighting chance of actually developing the best leaders in our industry, the best leaders in the business workplace, the best leaders of tomorrow, so that, we don't have to face the reality of the hard times, making hard men, but, the hard men making good times making soft men, and then soft men making weak times. We don't need to be in the middle of rolling with that wave of making weak times. We can become strong, we can become powerful, and most importantly, we can become the refined leaders of tomorrow. So I encourage you to apply for that, and if you don't, definitely click on the links below. Definitely click on those links below to get that refined leadership blueprint. I look forward to working with you soon. And hey, next week, we are going to talk about how to be more firm and assertive. I really want to lean into that so that we can start incrementally building up our communication, building up our character, so we can step in front of the world and say, you know what, we have something important to say, and we're going to bring it strong. So I look forward to seeing you on the next video.